Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, the deep state, the corrupt politicians, the private West Central Bank, the World Economic Forum, they are going to continue with their plan, trying to bring us into the Great Reset, the Green New Scam. At the point where they announced, hey, this is the perfect time to bring us into the Great Reset, this was back in March of 2020, they put everything in motion and they cannot stop it, even though the people are realizing that this is the wrong direction. At this point, they had no way out of it because they started everything in motion and they needed to destroy the economy. So when they started out back in 2020, they put everything into place and the economy started to fall apart and they started to implement all their policies. Now they can't back off. They can't say, hey, by the way, we have to put a pause on this, or hey, we've been wrong from the very, very beginning. They won't do that. They will continually push and push and push to the very end. I do believe Trump and the Patriots, they are counting on this. Why? Because they want the people to see the truth of the matter. Look what they're trying to do. Look how it's not working. And in the end, I do believe in the end, what they want is they want everyone looking at the central bank, everyone looking at the deep state players, the World Economic Forum, and everyone looking to see, look, every single one of these things that they've told you is completely fake, phony, and false. When you look at the Green New agenda, you could see it doesn't benefit the people. Actually, it's going to make it a lot worse for the people. And it's going to make energy very, very expensive. And it's not going to be able to power the number of homes, businesses, and everything else the way they're saying. And this is why, from the very, very beginning, they wanted depopulation. This is why they wanted destruction of the old economic system. Because to usher in their new system, they need something much, much smaller. They can't have what we have today and actually produce the amount of electricity, produce what they need. So they needed something on a much smaller scale. And this is why they thought the pandemic was the perfect time. They thought they would be able to reduce the population because, remember, they reported that they weren't going to have a vaccine until 10 to 12 years later, which means everyone would be trapped in their home. The economic system would completely and utterly crash on itself, which means people would have a difficult time finding food. A lot of people would become depressed because they had to stay in their home. They would run inflation like we've never seen before, which means they'd be printing and printing and printing and just handing out the currency, which would destroy the entire system. And they would turn around and blame it on the pandemic. Meanwhile, the people, basically, they would have no way out of this. Now, that whole thing was countered and they couldn't continue with it. But again, if you look at what they were trying to do and you take a step back, they were trying to basically limit the population, destroy their old system, and then rebuild it later on. Now they don't have the ability to do that. That's why they're trying to bring us into war right now. And this is why they're prepping everything to coincide with an economic crash. And they're going to use an event to cover up the economic crash. And that event will most likely try to bring us to war. But I do believe in the end, it's all going to fail. But if you look at their agenda, when you look at the entire Green New scam, you see it's not going to work. When you look at the UK, right now, the UK is paying a lot of money for electric. They're paying twice as much in Britain as they are in the US. And they want to erect solar panels in Britain. Well, the peak electricity demand in Britain is in the winter. And when you need to heat your homes, offices, shops, warehouse, factories, etc. But in the winter, solar farms produce almost no electricity in Britain. This is because it is dark for around 16 hours a day. And when the sun does appear, it is weak and usually hidden behind thick clouds. Solar energy may make sense in some countries. For example, maybe in North Africa, the desert, where you have sun all the time. But in certain other areas, it doesn't work. Same thing with wind power. So trying to do this is going to be very, very difficult. And I do believe in the end, it's going to make electricity a lot more expensive. When you look at New York, you can see the nation's largest offshore wind project is now breaking ground in New York. And they're going to say that this is going to power about 600,000 homes. But again, you're going to see it's going to take a toll on the water around these windmills. And most likely when there isn't wind, people aren't going to get the electric that they need. And we've seen this time and time again. Remember, right now what we have is we have wind power, solar power, and it's supplemented with coal-fired plants and everything else. subtract the coal fire, subtract the gas, subtract nuclear power, and if you just have solar panels and wind turbines, it is not going to produce what is needed to power everything in this country. Not the way the infrastructure is today, especially if you have all electric vehicles. But you got to remember, the deep state, the central bank, the World Economic Forum, they don't want everyone having an electric vehicle. They don't want these big cities. They want everything on a smaller scale. This is why Klaus Schwab was out there letting everyone know they're going to be turning some highways into parks, which only makes sense if you're going to keep people in a certain location and not allow them to travel, which means the EV market is basically being pushed on us just to get us out of fossil fuels, but they know they're not going to give everyone an electric vehicle. It's not going to work. And they want people to stay in their little smart cities. So once again, you can see they're going to continue pushing their green news scam. But I do believe in the end, since people are awake, this is all going to fail. Because remember, they're not going to have a cover story. They're not going to be able to cover all this up. And in the end, it will not work. Just like it's not working now with the EV market, because look how many companies now are going out of business. People are going back to fossil fuels. When you look at Ford, they gave it their best shot, spent like $3 billion, which they lost. And now they're taking those factories and they're making heavy duty trucks using gasoline. So you can see that everything is turning around now. And their objective, the deep state, the World Economic Forum, the central bank, their objective is completely and utterly falling apart. Just like the economy is falling apart right now. When you look at the real estate market, it's just getting worse and worse every single day. The Kobisi letter on X put this out and said, a record 6.7% of U.S. homes listed for sale experienced price drops over the last 4 weeks. This exceeded the 4.7 and 5.6% reading seen in the weakest 4-week periods of 2023 and 2022. The share of homes with price declines grew due to a drop in demand as buyers wait for mortgage rates and prices to fall. Most recently, 30-year fixed mortgage rates fell to 6.8% on July 17th from 7.1% 2 weeks earlier. Meanwhile, the median house sale price is sitting at a whopping $396,000, just $100 below last week's all-time high. Buyers are quickly disappearing in this market. And it's starting to look very, very similar to 2009. So this is very, very interesting. Now, the other thing that's very interesting is we know that the Fed is out there and they're letting everyone know that they're going to be cutting the rates. And we know that they're going to have one rate cut, most likely in September. And I do believe the Biden administration is going to push for the rate cut. Now, what's very interesting about this is Trump is letting the Fed know, do not cut the rates, but I do believe he's using reverse psychology on the Fed and on the deep state players, where if he's saying don't cut it, it means they're going to cut it. Now the IMF is suggesting raising taxes to pay off the $34 trillion U.S. federal debt and says the Fed should wait to drop interest rates. So they're saying the Fed should wait until they hit around a 2% target. Then they should start cutting the rates. But I do believe the Fed is already out there letting everyone know that they're most likely going to get close as possible to 2%, and then they're going to start to drop the rate. So I do believe what we see happening right now is the central bankers, they are now out there. They understand what's going on. I do believe they want the Biden administration to take the fall for all this. Remember, the Fed is not going to take the fall for what is happening in the economy. The central bankers are not going to take the fall for what is happening in this economy. What they want is they want the deep state players to actually push them into this, because they really don't care about the Biden administration. They don't care which leader there is, telling them what to do. They don't care if they're destroyed. Remember, there is no allegiance to a country, a leader, or anything like that. Their allegiance is to themselves. Their allegiance is to control. So if the Biden administration pushes them to do this, they'll just blame this on the Biden administration. And they'll say, yeah, we didn't want to do it. The IMF was saying we didn't want to do it, and they pushed us into doing it. And this way they can make the case that it wasn't them, it was the Biden administration. And I do believe they might try to use this strategy because we know what's going to happen once they cut the rates. The entire economic system is going to fall apart, and I do believe the market's going to come down. And of course, what is the central bank going to do? They're not going to want to take the blame for this, so most likely they'll start to blame the Biden administration. Plus, most likely we will see some type of cyber attack on this country and around the world. I mean, we've already seen CrowdStrike where they did an update. There were outages. Now everyone's looking at CrowdStrike. We know that it affects the airlines, it affects banking, it affects pretty much everything. So I think in the end, they will make the case for all of this, and they might even say that there are vulnerabilities in CrowdStrike protecting all these different systems, which allowed the hackers to hack into the system. So if you really start to look at how this is all playing out, you can see they're building this up and they're moving forward with their plan, because again, they already put everything in motion from the very, very beginning when we go back to 2020. Now we could see that at this point, they need to try to bring us into the Great Reset, the Green New Scam. And while they're doing this, they're going to have to try to delay the election. So we see all of this happening all at once, and we'll have to see how this all plays out. But I do believe Trump and the Patriots, they're going to be using all of this as leverage, because think about it. The central bankers, they will be at their weakest point right now because they brought the economy down. What are they going to say? They're going to bring it down again? No, that won't work. And I do believe Trump and the Patriots, they're going to have the ability to convince the people because, again, Trump already said, hey, don't cut the rates, don't do it. And they did it. And I do believe that's going to give him props because, again, he was telling them not to do it. And once again, the Biden administration decided to do it. The Fed followed along. So where is their credibility? It's in the toilet. And I do believe at this point in time, Trump and the Patriots, they will be able to then move in a completely different direction. And this is going to be very, very interesting how they're going to start to shift the people of this country and the people of the world away from the private Western central bank system. And once again, I do believe you need some proof to show the people exactly where all of this is headed. So we're going to have to watch this very carefully as we get closer and closer to the presidential election, because I do believe this is all going to happen around that time frame, and probably the market will come down around the October time frame. So we'll have to see how this all plays out. This will be very, very interesting, because in the end, without getting rid of the central bank, we still have these problems. So I do believe there has to be some type of move to go against the central bank and tell the people why we need to move away from the central bank. And I believe this is the direction that this country and the world will eventually be heading in. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.